everyone, welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Small business owners with more than 5 workers will now face legal action if there are any deadly accidents on site, as lawmakers could not reach an agreement to delay the expansion of the law. The law, the Serious Accident Punishment Act, was enacted in 2022, and it first targeted large corporations who would face criminal charges if a worker dies or seriously gets injured due to inadequate safety measures at the workplace. For companies with fewer than 50 employees, the government had granted a grace period, which ended on Saturday last week. The ruling party called for a delay of the law expansion, saying small business owners are not ready yet. But as they failed to persuade the main opposition party, the expanded implementation of this workplace safety law has taken effect. What exactly does this law state, and how did it actually affect small businesses? For more on this, we invite Professor Kim Yong-jin from Seogang Business School. Welcome to the show, Professor Kim.
Good evening.
Good evening. And we also have Mark Hua-Peck, Associate Attorney from Jipyeong LLC. Good to see you, Mr. Peck.
Hello, thank you for having me.
All right, Mr. Peck, first question. Let's first get to know a bit about workplace safety law in detail. Now, what is it and why was this introduced in the first place?
So the law is called the Serious Accident Punishment Act, also known as the SAPA. It was first enacted in January 2021, and then it first went into effect in January 2022 for workplaces with 50 or more employees. And then starting from last Saturday, now it applies to all workplaces with 5 or more employees. There has been a series of fatal accidents, like the Taean Thermal Power Plant in 2018, and then a fire at Icheon Logistics Center construction site in 2020, which led to almost 40 fatalities. And then also we had a Sewol-ho accident too. And then there has been some criticism that the Occupational Health and Safety Act, called OSHA, and then the criminal law do not really protect the employees very well, because they focused on the working level managers, such as the construction site manager and then the factory manager, because the top level executives like CEO were not considered to have specific and practical liabilities under those statutes. So those were the main reasons that led to the enactment of the SAPA. And so purpose of the law was first to establish a preventive system that protect the lives of employees and civilians. And then the second one was to punish the business owners or other responsible management people who did not take the appropriate approaches and then let fatal accidents happen.
All right, thank you for the explanation, Mr. Peck. Now, Professor Kim, like I said before, there were calls from ruling party to extend the grace period for the law, but following unsuccessful negotiations, the business community expressed concerns, saying this would lead to the closure of workplaces and worker layoffs. Now, what are their worries?
Right. As you mentioned, a lot of worries and concerns, are circling around the business community and small business owners, right? According to the Korea Enterprise Federation, the expanded implementation will likely result in negative effect for small business, like you mentioned, including closure of workplace or worker layoff, rather than achieving the expected result. Expected effect of preventing future accident. What the business leaders say is that small businesses are not properly prepared yet due to their financial problems. After the COVID-19 pandemic, companies with fewer than 50 employees, which account for about 80% of all serious accidents, are getting weaker in their financial performance. Moreover, most of the small business owners look like they are ignorant of the implementation of the law this year, so they are not ready to invest resources in people, procedures, and personnel equipment, that are required by law. Also, there are some big misunderstandings about the law. Most most small business owners believe that if there is a fatal accident in their workplace, probably the owners must be imprisoned, which is not true. But even though there are some still, small, holes and vague part in the law.
Right, I see. Well, Professor Kim explained to us what business sector's concerns are. However, Mr. Park, as our Professor Kim slightly mentioned, some point out that small and medium-sized enterprises do not have to worry that much, as they're not only already subject to the Industrial Safety and Health Act, but also the courts are going to be very prudent when punishing business owners. Now, what's your view on this?
Aside from all the discussions that whether the SAPA is good or bad, I think the small business owners have every reason to worry about, because mainly they're not really exempt from many requirements under the SAPA, such as setting a separate budget for the safety and health, and then the designating safety and health personnel, and also establishing emergency plan and doing the risk assessment and etc. And also, according to the Ministry of Labor, 60% of all fatal accidents occurred in workplaces with less than 50 employees in 2022. Of course, the courts will consider the size of the company and then the amount of budget they have, and then they're going to reflect those factors in the sentence at the end. If you do your best given what you have, it will certainly be considered. But that does not make them free from the requirements and liabilities under the SAPA. And also, even if they ultimately get acquitted, they will have to spend a lot of time and then money and then energy defending themselves from against the labor ministry and then prosecution. So at the end of the day, I think the very purpose of the SAPA is to put pressure on the business owners. So I think they have some reason to worry about.
All right, small business owners have every reason to worry about this. Now, compared to this, Mr. Park, labor unions welcome the latest development, saying it laid a minimum legal foundation for workers' lives and safety. However, some are even asking that the minimum sentence for those punished be raised from 1 to 3 years. What's their view?
So they have 3 main arguments. The first one is that SAPA is really crucial to protect the employees in the small businesses. And then the small businesses should not be neglected. There are like 8 million workers working in workplaces with less than 50 employees. So that's the first argument from them. And then the second one is that it was first enacted in 2021, and then now it's 2024. So they had like 3 years of grace period to prepare for this law. So if you postpone the law again, they are saying that there's no guarantee that they're going to be ready in near future. So, and then in some small businesses such as restaurants and hair salons, fatal accidents do not really happen often. So, and then some of the requirements of the SAPA is lowered for the small businesses. For example, they do not have to have a specific safety and health organization, and then they don't need to really hire a separate safety professional. Because the level of the requirements is quite lowered for the small businesses, they won't get too much burden. Those are the main arguments from the labor side, and then to some degree that makes sense.
All right, I see. Well, such issues always have pros and cons, and so, Professor Kim, sometimes it is better to refer to overseas cases. Now, how are other countries doing, and do they have any similar laws like this?
Yeah, and before answering the question, we have to really think about the fact that the workplace safety is getting more and more important and prioritized across the industries and countries. Right? Some statistics show that about 340 million occupational accidents are reported every year worldwide, and 6,300 people die every day due to work-related accident or disease. These accidents also cause economic drawbacks, as every year about 4% of GDP is to be affected by this occupational health and instance. These numbers led to more and more business or paying attention to workplace safety regulations. Okay, now the South of Korea is known to follow the basic scheme of UK's Corporate Manslaughter Act and the Corporate Homicide Act of 2007, which made the corporate manslaughter a criminal liability due to lack of due care, even though it is not an intentional consequences. In the U.S., Occupational Safety and Health Administration imposes fines for serious violations, willful violations, or repeated violations of workplace safety standard. The fines can range from $1,000 to $100,000 depending on the severity of the accident. And also we have another example. Also the criminal penalties, including fines and imprisonment, may apply in cases of willful violations resulting in fatality. Germany established the Occupational Health Safety Act and the German Social Accident Insurance, both of which are involved in enforcing safety regulations. When failing compliance, companies may face fines, and individuals responsible for the violation may be held personally liable. France set up the French labor code that outlined the safety and health regulations. Penalties for non-compliance may include fines and, in extreme cases, imprisonment. Japan also has the Industrial Safety and Health Act for workplace safety. Penalties for violations can include fines and imprisonment. To conclude, most developed countries, regulate the workplace health and safety by law. Some countries punish only willful violations, but others give penalties to even unwillful and unintentional failure of due care.
All right, cases we can refer to. Now, Professor Kim, before we move on to another issue, I'd like to ask you this last question. Now, eventually, owners of businesses with fewer than 50 employees will have to face penalties in the event of serious industrial accidents. In what ways should the government support this law in order for it to be implemented properly, and how should businesses prepare?
Yeah, as we mentioned, in small businesses, lack of resources to invest in those kind of preparation. So first of all, government need to provide resources and clear guidelines to make small businesses ready to set up goals and personnel, procedures, and equipment as requested by law. Government also need to try to clearly define the criteria for punishment and the measures, so that the SME CEOs understand what they have to do and how they have to do. And CEOs or employers need to recognize the key issues of the law. I mean, they don't have to be afraid, if they are well ready, well prepared in terms of, the requirement by the law. And so that, they have to put more effort to strengthen safety management.
All right. Well, thank you for your advice, Professor Kim. Now, Mr. Park, shifting gears a bit here to how the South Korean government has decided to abolish mandated holiday breaks for large supermarkets. And what are the details, and when was this first introduced?
So the operation restriction on the large supermarkets was first introduced in 2012 under the Distribution Industry Development Act. And then the law enables the local government to put restriction on the first operation hours and then mandatory holidays. Most governments have set every other Sunday as mandatory holiday and then restricted them from operating at night from midnight to 10 a.m., including the online deliveries. The purpose of such a restriction was first to give some rooms to mom and pop stores in the traditional market because they were not competitive enough to compete with the larger supermarkets. And then the second one was to provide some resting periods on weekends, on Sundays, for employees in the large supermarkets, considering their health concerns, because the large supermarkets usually operates throughout the year. There has been some criticism that such a restriction was against the constitutional right. And then secondly, the local government's decision to set every other Sunday as mandatory holiday was just too harsh, because the weekend is when the largest supermarkets get their most revenues from. In 2014, the largest supermarkets actually won a case against some restrictions in Dongdaemun-gu, where the Seoul High Court ruled that the restriction be canceled, saying that the restriction was too extensive. But ultimately, the Supreme Court reversed the decision by the Seoul High Court, and then in 2015, and found it that the restriction was valid. They also challenged the court in the case in the Constitutional Court, but then the Constitutional Court also found in 2013 and 2018 that the law is not against the Constitution.
All right. So based on what our Mr. Peck told us, there were many intentions behind this introduction of the law. But one major reason for this policy was to actually protect smaller traditional markets. But Professor Kim, did this actually work? And moreover, some workers in large supermarkets are reportedly not welcoming this change in policy. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. I mean, before answering that question, I'd like to quote one statement from a customer who is a 32-year-old white-collar employee. Okay, what she said, even if the supermarket chains are closed, I almost never go to traditional markets or small markets. Instead, I order groceries online from Coupang or Market Gully. This statement, reveals some truth about the effect of the policy. I mean, supermarkets and traditional markets may have different target customers. A 4-year study, by the Seoul Credit Guarantee Foundation on credit card transactions at large Seoul supermarkets reveals a 1.7% decrease in sales on closed Sundays compared to open ones. That means the policy did not achieve its expected or intended effect. The shutdown policy may be favorable to online platforms like Coupang or Market Gully. Given the shifting retail landscape since the 2012 revision of the Distribution Industry Development Act, the number of stores of the 3 biggest hypermarket chains, including E-Mart, Lotte Mart, and HomePlus, has dropped from 410 in 2017 to 375, recently due to the factors, such as the rapid expansion of e-commerce platforms and also the COVID-19 pandemic. From hypermarket employee perspective, absolutely, if the stores move to shut down from Sunday to weekdays, they will lose, their own family time or, rest time on Sunday. So they are not, welcoming. They are not happy about the change in the policy.
All right, I see your point. There definitely seems some questions and doubts about the policy. Mr. Peck, again, let's see some of the overseas cases. Is there any other country that regulates large supermarkets like South Korea right now?
So in Japan, they had some similar regulations in 1970s, but then it was abolished in 2000. And then in France, where they have most similar restrictions like Korea, they restricted the operation of supermarkets on Sundays to 5 Sundays throughout the year. But in Macron government, they're lifting some of the restrictions so that they can open now on Sundays, 12 Sundays throughout the year. And then in some areas, like the tourist areas, they can open throughout the year. For UK and Germany, their restriction is more about whether they can open a supermarket in that area in the first place. Once they're open, they have to, for the procedure, they have to listen to the government's opinion and then the residents nearby and then their opinion. But once they're open, there's no restriction like Korea where they're not allowed to open on Sundays. So overall, they used to have some kind of restrictions at Korea, but then we can say that some of the restrictions are getting lifted.
Oh, all right. I see your point. Now, Professor Kim, before we wrap up this show, I'd like to give you this last question. So, how should the government discuss scrapping this mandatory closure days regulation without major hiccups?
Well, this is not an easy issue, because the conflict, among the stakeholders like consumers, and nobody, think about consumers, but consumers, supermarkets, and, small the markets and also employees. Right? So first of all, the government need to collect and analyze data about the effect of shutdown policy, before it decide the next move. We have huge data about, customer behaviors, like, what they buy, how they buy, where they go on the shutdown Sunday. Based on this analysis and considering the effect of the policy change on, employee health and happiness, the government need to make move. Secondly, government need to come up with a better policy which is focusing more on the win-win growth between the supermarket and mom and pop store and also customers by using regional merchandising framework. I mean, how to make the retail ecosystem in the region, may affect the customer visiting intention and the performance of both supermarkets and also the mom and pop stores. It may require the development of regional merchandising expert and also new types of business districts policy.
All right, we will need to come up with in-depth data analysis and a win-win strategy. All right, well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Mr. Park and Professor Kim, for your time and insights today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.